Hi, and welcome to Cooking While Fighting Cancer. I'm Jenny, and I'm battling cancer right now. And I love to cook, so I thought what better way to spend my time during treatment and everything else than cooking. So today I'm actually making risotto, one of my favorite dishes. The great thing about risotto is it goes with so many different things. So I'm going to teach you the risotto tonight, but I also have other videos where I make a pesto salmon with asparagus and diced tomatoes. That's fantastic with this risotto. You can do crispy chicken thighs, you can do meatballs. So it's just a great dish all around. Plus the fact that my risotto can be made dairy-free if you just do not put the Parmesan cheese on at the end. And we have some people in our family that are lactose intolerant, so that works really, really well. So I will teach you how to make this. So the first thing that I do is I actually chop up a shallot. So I'm going to chop the shallot up really quickly because that's the first thing that I'll be doing. Okay, so risotto does take a little bit of time, I will tell you. It is kind of about half an hour being near the stove, but it is so worth it when you actually taste it at the end. So with risotto, you're going to be using chicken broth that you want to keep warm in a pot, and then the risotto that you'll be cooking in front. So the first thing I always do is start my, you're going to be using 8 cups of, a lot of chicken broth, 8 cups. I'm going to start with my 4 cups of chicken broth. I'm going to put it in a pot so I can start heating that up. I'm going to keep the stove on medium for that chicken broth to warm up. Okay, in my front pot here, where I'm going to start with my risotto, I'm going to first put some olive oil. So I am actually going to put in 3 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm going to turn it on to medium heat. And I'm going to start sauteing my shallots. I'm going to put my shallots in. There we go. And I just want to start sauteing them so they soften a little bit. And that's going to take probably a good 3 to 5 minutes. And by that point, my chicken broth should be warm enough I can start adding it to the pot. Now I'm going to be adding 1 clove of garlic. I'm going to use my garlic grater, using my hands very carefully, not to grate my fingers. I'm going to grate in a clove of garlic. Now the garlic only needs to cook for about a minute. If you overcook garlic, it starts becoming bitter, and it really will change the taste of the dish. So you really just want maybe just a minute till you start smelling the garlic. Okay, now that my shallots and garlic are ready, it's time to add the Arborio rice for my risotto. So I'm going to add 1.5 cups of this to my olive oil, shallots, and garlic. Now I like to cook this rice for about 3 minutes. You're kind of toasting a little bit, bringing out some of the flavor. So I'm going to stir this around and coat it with the olive oil, shallots, and garlic for about 3 minutes. And then we'll be ready to start adding the chicken broth. Okay, my risotto's now been cooking away for about 3 minutes, and I'm ready to start adding my warm broth. And I do it at about 1 cup at a time. So I'm going to take a cup full of the broth and pour it in. That sound you hear is what you want to hear. That warm broth hitting the warm risotto makes a wonderful sizzling sound. And the goal is going to be, for the next probably good 20-25 minutes, is to slowly add broth in. You never want the risotto to dry out. So as you see it getting a little drier, you're going to add some more broth. Okay, so we're continuing to add our chicken broth to the risotto. As it starts to dry out, as I said, as it starts to get a little dry on top, not as much liquid, you add a little more of the broth back in and just keep doing it. Okay, and you will get to a point where your 4 cups of broth are almost gone. So at this point, you'll add in your next 4 cups of broth into the warm pan. And you're going to warm that up so as you continue to add broth to your risotto, it is warm. You're not bringing down the temperature of the risotto, which would stop the cooking. So we're going to add another 4 cups, heat up that broth, and just keep adding it to the risotto until basically the other 4 cups are gone and your risotto is fully cooked. But I'll show you what that looks like when we get there. Okay, the risotto is continuing to cook. I'm getting further down on my last 4 cups of broth. Just so you know, as you add the broth, it's really not as important as how much you're adding. I do kind of about a cup, maybe a little less than that. The more important thing is that you don't want your risotto to dry out. So to continue to keep it with some liquid cooking away. So that's really the goal. Okay, so now I've added all 8 cups of the chicken broth, and the risotto is very, very nice and fluffy. If you still have a lot of liquid, keep cooking it. It will cook down. You still like a little bit of liquid in it. I like a creamy risotto. Once you get all 8 cups in and it's looking fluffy, then you're ready to go. Okay, so at this point, we don't have too much liquid left. It's nice and creamy, fluffy. We are ready to season our risotto. Okay, seasoning the risotto. So this is going to depend on a lot of things. One, if you are going to add your Parmesan cheese and make it a dairy risotto, that's going to add some salt. So you're not going to need as much salt. Plus chicken broth can be very different depending on the brand. So what I do is I put my Parmesan cheese in first. I use a 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. I like aged. It's a little easier, especially if you can't digest dairy. A lot of people can digest aged Parmesan. So I put my Parmesan cheese in, and I'm going to stir that around. Pepper. I like fresh ground pepper, and I actually put 4 cranks of fresh ground pepper in. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to stir that in. The salt. So this is where it's going to come into play depending on what you've used. Start with some, taste it, and if it tastes bland at all, if it tastes like it just doesn't have enough flavor, it means you probably need more salt. So what I do is I add some salt. I'm going to stir it around. And then I'm actually going to taste it and see where I am at my salt level before I add more. So I tasted mine. I definitely need a little more salt. Sometimes you need quite a bit, sometimes not too much. So as again, if it's lacking any flavor, I would add a little more salt. Stir it up. And now your risotto is ready, perfect consistency, nicely seasoned. And you can eat it plain, or you can add any of the other great things I mentioned on top. Okay, now if the risotto is ready, I'm going to dish some up so you can see what it looks like. It's nice and creamy and hot, and it really is not too bad. There's no heavy cream in there. There's not a ton of cheeses and butters, and so it's a creamy dish, but it's actually not too bad for you, and it's so delicious. Enjoy.